Okay, good morning, Linda. Thank you for joining True Hope Cast today. We've had some technical issues which the audience won't have experienced, but you and I have been through a lot already. How are you? What's going well?
Oh, I am so delighted to be able to talk to you, Simon. And isn't it wonderful that today we had kind of an opportunity of dealing with some obstacles and how to get past those? And the idea of you just keep trying and you just keep going. And even your comment that sometimes we just need a little reset and then things seem to turn out okay.
Absolutely. Yep. Just restarted my computer and everything was okay. Patience and, perseverance, I suppose. How about just a little bit of an introduction? Would love to learn a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Oh, fantastic. So, my name is Linda Bjork. I am an author. I am a podcast host like yourself. My podcast is called Linda's Corner. And I am also the founder of a nonprofit called Hope for Healing, where we help people become their best selves. Things like improving confidence and self esteem, managing stress, overcoming depression and anxiety, and just doing all those things that help us to live a happy, fulfilled, joyful life.
How did you get into something like that? Is that from a personal experience, a personal transformation story?
Absolutely. You know, there is a saying that your mess is your message. And that is precisely what happened with me. I was going along my merry way, doing the best I can. And I like to kind of divide who I am into two parts. I was broken and I was crushed. So, the first part of just being broken is I grew up in a wonderful home with a great mother and father who did their very best. And when I was about 6 years old, my mother experienced a trauma in her life, and that just shut her off, shut her down. She was emotionally unavailable for me. But I didn't see it as, oh, I should have compassion on my mom because she's going through something hard. All I saw was, my mom doesn't want to have anything to do with me. My mom doesn't love me. She doesn't like me. She doesn't want me around. What did I do?
How old were you?
6. It's like I must have done something bad or there's something wrong with me. I am unlovable. And that became just the model for who I was. I am invisible. I don't matter. I'm not important. And that just kind of was the blueprint for my life. I figured, well, this is the way that it is. And I didn't want everyone to know that I was unlovable. And so you kind of create a little bit of a mask. And it's like, I'm going to try to pretend to be what I think you want me to be. And if you knew the real me, Simon, you would know that I'm unlovable and you wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. And so we kind of create that sort of a little bit of a mask and a persona. And I found out you can live a great life when you're broken. You just do your best and you move on. But then as an adult, I had a series of experiences that just were perfectly tailored to crush me into dust. And I won't bore you with woe is me stories, but just the little tip of the iceberg. I have had my jaw wired shut for 6 weeks to heal from a broken jaw. I have survived an airplane emergency landing when the engine exploded. I have arrived at the scene of a motorcycle accident in time to see my son's broken body lying in the middle of an intersection surrounded by flashing light and emergency personnel. It should have killed him, but fortunately it didn't. But it did break both legs. He required multiple surgeries. He was bedridden for several weeks. He had to relearn how to walk. I've been awoken in the middle of the night with a phone call that my 9-month-old grandson had a seizure, and he was not expected to make it through the night. He was life flighted to Primary Children's Hospital, where they did emergency surgery to try to relieve the pressure on his brain, followed by another very delicate brain surgery where they went from the top of his skull all the way to the base, trying to clear out a blockage. They gave us a 30% chance of success. He did survive, but unfortunately, he did sustain brain damage from the incident. I also have another beautiful grandchild who was diagnosed with cancer at age 5 months. I have a daughter who has a brain tumor. I mean, stuff. And there was a point in my life where I felt like life stinks and I don't want to play anymore. It was more than I could handle. And I slipped into depression. And it was like falling into a deep, dark pit where there were no windows and no doors, and I was stuck, and there was no way out. And it was so deep that it was like sunlight and hope and happiness could not reach me. And I thought, well, this is my new reality. But I had some practice at pretending to be better than I was. And so I use those skills and I'm going to pretend that everything is okay. And I'm going to do my best to not let you know that I am empty and dark inside. And I was in this place for about 5 years, but almost no one knew. And about this time, my sister, who was training to become a life coach at that time, she was hosting this women's retreat, and she contacted me and said, "Hey, I've rented this condo in the mountains for 3 days and 3 nights. I'm going to do this women's retreat. I'm going to teach people how to be happy and live fulfilled. And do you want to come?" And I thought, no, no way. Because, first of all, I was struggling with social anxiety. I did not feel safe, not anywhere, not with anyone. And I didn't think I could handle being around other people day and night for 3 days. And I also I was stuck in a dark place, and there were no doors and there were no windows and there was no way out. And there was nothing she was going to say that was going to help me. And I thought, there's really no point. It's going to be miserable with no point. But even though I didn't want to go, the idea wouldn't leave my mind. And so I gathered up all of my courage and I went. And I'm so glad that I did, because that decision changed my life. It was as if my sister lowered a ladder down into my deep, dark hole. And she showed me a way to climb out. And I have learned that healing, it's not like flipping on a light switch where it's instant. It's not like an elevator where you just press a button and voila, you're where you want to be. It's more like that ladder where it's slow and steady, or like a sunrise where the changes from moment to moment might be small and imperceptible, but it does come. And so, because of my experience of feeling broken, feeling not good enough, feeling depressed, feeling anxious, feeling stuck, feeling hopeless, I know what that feels like. And I know that we don't have to stay there. And that is what is so amazing. Having that experience of being able to heal and being able to change and grow and to be able to be happy again. In fact, I am better now than I ever was before, because when I was broken and feeling like, I'm not good enough, and if anybody knew the real me, you wouldn't really like me, you'd know that I'm not really lovable. And now I like myself. And I know that if you don't like me, that's fine, but it's not about me. That's your problem. You know what I mean? So it's very kind of different that way. And so, because of what I've been through, it matters to me very much that people know that they don't have to stay stuck. They don't have to stay sad. They don't have to stay miserable. They can be happy and joyful and live a beautiful, fulfilled life.
Yeah, it's always quite remarkable to me how traumatic events, I mean, you described a compounding amount of different events, but something traumatic, whether that's a death in the family or disease, or something really big happening in somebody's life that's usually a negative, is what helps people wake up. It shakes everything up. It breaks down beliefs. It breaks down old personalities that we've created. And I find what you're talking about when you were 6 years old, and what was going on for your mother, and then how you as a 6-year-old was trying to navigate that, and just trying to survive, and by creating this personality where you're putting on this mask for a lot of other people. And do you think, looking back at that, because you use that as a very specific example at 6 years old, looking back now of what you know and who you are, do you feel that event really created a personality that was wrapped around like more of like a survival mechanism?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And what's interesting as we talk about the things that happen to us in our childhood, I've had the wonderful opportunity to speak to many doctors and physicians. And I had one who's practiced for 40 years. And she said, research shows, and my own experience verifies, that a good 85% and above of the issues that people go to the doctor for are actually based on stress or childhood trauma. These things become physically manifest as well as mentally and emotionally, depending on how you respond to things. But they affect us, and they affect us until we take care of them.
Yeah, I think I've got a couple of examples in regards to like traumatic things that have happened to me and within my family, and I just think about how to that we don't really necessarily get the support that we may need, and that's not to blame other people or governments or health authorities, whatever, but it's like it's interesting because that traumatic thing is happening, it requires our immediate attention, and you might not actually have the time or the ability or the available energy to process and digest like what is happening. I think that process of healing is very much like a parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system response. But when you are in the traumatic event, your brain is using completely different pathways, is using completely different chemicals, and you don't actually have the ability to start like, digesting the trauma just like you would digest food to obtain the nutrients, everything with it, and you would eliminate the toxins. I think it's very important that we attempt to do that with traumatic events, but it's so difficult that we don't really get check. We don't get people who are like maybe checking in with us, because we do put on this protective facade, this mask that we are okay and we're going to be fine. But in the moment, that trauma that's hit our nervous system and our body is like, that's energy that is bound, that is got to go somewhere. And if it doesn't get like processed through therapies and other different modalities that might, whatever works for the individual, it sits and it goes somewhere, and that energy is like bound to your physical body. And as you say, like 85% of like what people go into the doctors for, it's like bound stress, it's trauma that, if you're 6 years old, like how are you, you're not expected to be able to digest a traumatic event, because you can't really even translate what's happening. You would just immediately go into a safety mechanism of just like trying to get through things, and how that it ends up affecting you as an adult. So it's like, I think my question, I suppose, is like, a lot of people experience trauma, and in the moment we're not excuse me, we're not necessarily like supported. What do you think is missing from that equation? Because I think we all know when people are going through something traumatic, and we might want to give people space to deal with that in the moment, but then there's the come down of post event, where we could be supporting people and creating community. And you say you went with your sister to a retreat, which I'm sure just being with other people in an energetic healing state, just that was like powerful enough to start.
You brought up so many wonderful things. And as we're talking about is it okay if I go back for just a second on some of the things that you talked about?
Oh, please.
I love that you mentioned that as we're looking at traumatic events, we're not looking for something to blame. And that just kind of stuck in my mind, because when we're trying to heal, it is completely different from looking for something to blame, of saying, well, it's all your fault that I turned out the way that I did, and it's all this person's fault and that experience's fault, and there's nothing I can do about it. Because that process of self-awareness and becoming aware of where the source of the problem is so important. But if we stop there and say blame, anger, 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 it can help feed and make the situation worse, rather than going through that process of healing. And I love that you mentioned that we're also in this, our parasympathetic or our sympathetic dominant states of where we're at right now. And I love that you have such a sound understanding of this, because not everybody understands that this makes such a difference. Our bodies are so amazing. It does so many things automatically. I don't have to think about breathing. I don't have to think about pumping my heart. I don't have to think about digesting food. I don't have to think about my body fighting off disease or healing from issues. It does it all by itself through this beautiful autonomic nervous system. But those branches that split off between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, this rest and digest and this fight and flight, is something that a lot of people don't understand. This wonderful fight and flight system is like a turbo boost. It's to be able to help us get away from that tiger, help us to be able to get away from whatever situation that's imminent danger, this threat that we've got to get through. And it gives us this turbo boost by redirecting the energy from other sources. And so it's like, okay, let's take right now, we got to get away from this tiger. We got to get away from this threat. So we don't need to digest food right now. Let's turn off our digestive system or turn it down. And we don't need to worry about fighting disease right this second. We'll take care of that later. So let's turn off our immune system. Let's turn off our growth processes. Let's turn off or turn down our reproductive processes. And it turns all these things and directs the energy elsewhere so that we can get out or survive this problem. And then our body's supposed to switch back, and then everything takes care of it just so beautifully. But the problem is when we stay stuck in this fight or flight, then our bodies and our minds, everything falls apart because you cannot function long term when your digestive system isn't working. You can't function long term when your immune system has stopped and your body stops healing itself and doing all those things that it was designed naturally to do. And so, as we learn how to be able to get back into that rest and digest state, or that another word they call it is the relaxation response, it helps us to be able to allow our body to heal itself in this natural and beautiful ways. So, it is so cool that you know all that, which is wonderful because not everybody does. How important it is to be able to not stay in that constant stress mode and what it does, how it affects us physically, not just mentally and emotionally. Everything is connected. And so that is awesome. Now, I think, forgive me, the question that you asked before I went off on this was about what can we do to step in and play a support role? And I think part of that is first that we want to support the person and show trust in them. There's a very different mentality of saying, oh, you are a mess and I am going to fix you. It doesn't go over very well for the person who is not in a good place. When we are able to, at any possible level, to empower them through teaching, through compassion, through invitation, as much as possible, not forcing. I know there are occasional situations where you do have to really do an intervention, but as much as possible, show trust in that person and what they are capable of. Because when it comes down to it, real, true healing comes from the inside out, not from the outside in. And in order to heal from the inside out, you have to have the cooperation of the person who needs to be healed.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for a lot of people to understand things like energy and frequency because it's not something that we see. It's not something that we can, we can identify with our senses and kind of translate it into other things in the world. But I think when you do have an understanding, especially of just like the the basic biology of how our nervous system works and what it was originally designed for, and how we might not be running away from lions and tigers, but our biology is very, very similar. It's exactly the same as it would have been back then, and we cannot have a sustained long-term period of a sympathetic fight or flight response, because as you say, so many systems are shut down when we're in that state. You will be able to digest some food, but your capability goes from let's say 90 to 100% when you are in a relaxed state to like 5 to 10%. You'll digest some food and you could probably get away with that for a long period of time, but at some point you are going to have a dis-ease and it's going to be a problem. And hopefully you work with a good practitioner that can not necessarily just like jump to a pharmaceutical, but can work with the fact that, okay, you've been, this issue is 20 years in the making. Now it's like got to a point where your body can't deal with it anymore. We've got to go back to root causes. We've got to go back to fundamentals and basics about how often your body is experiencing a stress state. And I love that you're talking about healing is an internal experience, because I think because we do have these very limited senses that we believe create our reality, we blame and we have anger and we have rage of all the things that don't work for us, and we're just constantly like giving our energy away. We're like literally like it's coming out of us, and we've just got this this pot of resources that we have day to day that gets allocated to different areas of the body. Like we only have a certain amount of resources to be able to do that. But if you're blaming everybody and everything for even just like minor things, or all the really big things, you're constantly just like giving that energy away. Your frequency, your energy is like coming out from you. But if you actually want to heal root causes and get into that trauma, get into that thing that happened to you, that is the complete reversal of that energetic shift. You are, putting focus on the areas within your body that just like might not be working. But when you start like using meditation or you start using yoga, you literally change the direction of your energy potential. And where you put your energy, where you put your awareness is where you put your energy. And when people start to doing that, when you see breakthroughs in using therapies or using meditation, there's so many amazing options out there for people who like to try different things. But when you start sitting with yourself and start sitting with those thoughts, start sitting with those feelings, start sitting with those behaviors that you're exhibiting that might not be serving you, you can have absolutely profound impacts, because you are unable to change anything within your physical body by expecting the outside world to do it, because you're playing this blame game. But if you're going inward, you're going internal, you can do some absolutely remarkable things, because you can literally redirect your immune system to start healing you. And when people just don't quite understand that yet, I think our school system massively fails us in regards to what we're teaching people in biology. But like, if they start to teach people that you can have anger, you can have rage, you can have frustration, these are very normal human emotions and responses. But understanding that emotion, understanding what that biochemically does to you, and if you don't get that under control, that will inevitably cause a physical problem within your body. If if you can't bring that chronic stress or that chronic thing down and really associate with it, and digest what's going on for you, and just like be able to sit back, slip back into that rational mind a little bit, rather than being driven by this like reptilian brain constantly all the time. So I think there's so many things that we can do in regards to a supportive nature, but it certainly starts with our young people, and it certainly starts with our our school systems being able to telling kids that they've got this unbelievable power within themselves to do remarkable things and to get through seemingly impossible things. And you use your example of 6 years old, traumatic event, and you start to create this personality. We're talking like what, couple of decades until you like have you start breaking that down. And that's like, it's for some people it's 20, 30, 40, 50 years of not being your true authentic self, which has unlimited potential.
Wow, Simon, it is so exciting to be able to talk with you and to feel that we are on the same page. And it elevates the ability and the potential for the conversation. And I love that you're talking about the root causes. That to me is just so delightful. You're probably aware of root cause analysis. And one of the most famous kind of examples of this is in a building in the United States called the Jefferson Memorial Building, which is a very famous in Washington, D.C., this beautiful monument. And at one point, people were very concerned because the beautiful stones were deteriorating on this precious monument. And they thought, oh no, what are we going to do? And so they used this root cause analysis to try to figure out why are these stones deteriorating. And they found out that the reason probably was because they were using these high power pressure sprayers every 2 weeks to clean the building. And they thought, okay, well, why are you using these high power pressure washers every 2 weeks? That seems kind of frequent. And they said, well, we have to, because there's bird poop everywhere, and you can't have bird poop on a national monument. So they said, okay, I think that's it. We got to get rid of the birds. And so the first solution was, let's put bird netting all over it. Let's try to protect it from the birds. Didn't work. Super ugly. The birds found a way to get in. Back to the drawing board. Why are there so many birds? And they said, well, they come to eat. There's so many spiders. And then the question, why are there so many spiders? That's really creepy. They said, well, because there's so many bugs for the spiders to eat. Why are there so many bugs? And it was because they were drawn to the lights, the beautiful bright lights that they had shining on these buildings all night long. And so they thought, well, if that's the root of the problem, then I guess what we need to do is not leave the lights on so much. We'll turn it on a little bit in the evening, and then we'll shut it off at night. And then when they did that, they had 90% less bugs, which had less spiders, which had less birds, which had less bird poop, which had less necessarily cleaning, which made it so that the building wasn't deteriorating. Now, if you start from just the beginning and you say, okay, I have this very precious building that needs to be protected and it's deteriorating, and you come up from then say, then I think you should turn out the lights. When you hear that kind of an answer, your first thought is, you're not taking my problem seriously. You have no idea what is actually going on. And it's just this, I mean, it sounds kind of ridiculous. But when you understand the process, that you're not dealing with just the symptoms, but you're working all the way down to find the root of the problem, and that actually solved the problem, then it kind of helps us to be able to understand why, when we're talking about things like we have health issues, we have mental and emotional issues, people are struggling with depression and anxiety, we have people who are suicidal, we have so many issues. And we're talking about something that on a surface level might not sound like it's addressing the problem, but it's actually addressing something deeper. As we go back and we're able to find out those root causes of these problems, all of a sudden a lot of the other layers just kind of magically take care of themselves. So I love that you keep talking about that we go to the root and we address the root.
Yeah, I mean, it only makes sense really in regards to if you're looking at an individual from a functional standpoint. I think that we have been, unfortunately, I mean, conventional medicine does some miraculous things, and it's wonderful that we even have that as an option. But the kind of addiction to a quick fix that not just physicians have, and the medical community, but like us as individuals, us as consumers, we want one thing that's going to take care of that problem like right away. And for a lot of people, the side effects are just, there's just collateral damage. We want to take our pain away. We want to, be able to do this and that, because, honestly, at the end of the day, like looking back at yourself and looking at like what the root cause of these issues are, it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy journey, like by any means. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of diving into the unfamiliar and the unpredictable. And, we don't really like that as human beings. We like things to be, really like really common, really familiar to us. So diving into that kind of like dark place is tricky for people. But at the end of the day, if you want a new result, if you want something, if you want change in your life or within your physical body, you have to start, diving into those potentially scary places. But that's the place where creativity happens, and like remarkable things happen. So yeah, it's a shame that it takes traumatic events for people to step into that realm, because we've always had the potential to do that, even from like a very young age, because we are so unbelievably energetic at that age. We do have this power, we do have this ability to be resilient, to do remarkable things. My question in regards to healing and the journey and how that begins, like is there a commonality between like what most people's healing journey looks like?
Excellent question. I like to say that every journey to healing begins with hope, using hope as kind of as a acrostic, I guess, where each letter stands for something. The H stands for having a hunger, and a hunger is a desire. But it's not just a little bit of a desire, because I think on some level everybody wants to heal. I mean, who wants to be sick? But it has to reach a tipping point, and that is when you want to change more than you want to stay the same. And sometimes that's why we have to have a traumatic event to make us realize, I can't stay in this place anymore. Smart people are going to figure it out before then. Some of us who are not so smart, we have to go through some dips. But if we have that hunger, then all of a sudden the world opens up to us, because no one can heal without their consent. The O stands for openness. When I was struggling with depression and anxiety, I was just tight, trying to hide. I was like a little armadillo rolled up in a ball, and they do that to protect themselves. And that's precisely what I was doing. I was in survival mode. I was just trying to survive. But we can't heal in that place until we begin to open up. And it doesn't have to go from super, super tight to arms open wide. That's pretty unrealistic. For me, one of the first steps was admitting to another person, I'm not in a good place. And that was, I know that sounds like a simple sentence, but it was very hard to say and to admit. And that was the beginning of allowing someone else to be able to help me. So we also have to be open to some new ideas. Like you mentioned, we have things that we understand and that are maybe traditional and well accepted, but sometimes the things that work are a little less understood and a little less well known. And so we have to open up our minds to some possibilities. We also have to be open to change. So that openness is very important for healing. The P stands for positive expectancy, and a positive expectancy is expecting a positive outcome. When we worry, we're expecting something bad to happen. When we're feeling hopeful, we're expecting something good to happen. Having that positive expectancy is so important because healing takes work. And if we don't think it's going to do any good, we're not going to give it a try. So sometimes that positive expectancy comes from seeing someone else's experience and realizing, it worked for them. So maybe, just maybe, it'll work for me. The E stands for empowerment. And when we're feeling just low self esteem, low confidence, victim mentality, depression, anxiety, all of these things, we're very fearful. We feel very powerless, like there's nothing we can do about it. And we're just sort of victims to circumstance. We have to recognize our own power. And in order to get that empowerment, it comes from a combination of learning and doing. Learning is a very important step, but by itself, it's not enough. We have to change some of the things that we do. There's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear that I love. And he has a quote in there where he says, the most practical way to change who you are is to change what you do. And so that's why I always include action steps of small, simple things that we can do to help change the way that we feel.
I love the openness part of that. So you've got hunger, openness, positive expectancy, and empowerment. I really love the openness piece in regards to healing because I think that when we, as we spoke about before, without a traumatic event and, our stress response kicks in and we're just trying to survive and get through it. And then, we hopefully want to kind of turn that off and then be able to rest and digest that experience. Like I always imagine, you've got a deer in the forest, here's a little twig snap, has a little look, realizes the threat is over, and then just goes back to eating the grass. That is a very beautiful, very simple example of how our nervous system kicks into gear. But when the threat is over, it will just down regulate and put us back into a healing state. And there's no way we're going to be able to start healing from within if we're not going to be open to the people around us, within our communities, within our families, and being open to being vulnerable, being open to healing, and being open towards, you can't go through something traumatic and try and heal from that just on your own. You need that support, you need the energy, you need that connectivity with other human beings who can understand what you're going through. We can all might not be able to understand exactly what that person is going through, but I have a connection with what despair looks like. I have a connection with what rage and anger and hopelessness feels like. I have a connection with those emotions, so I can tune into that. I can be very empathetic to an individual if they were to open up with that. But yeah, we're kind of wild. Human beings are very, very interesting because the one thing that's going to help us and get us through years and years of trauma is simple connectivity and openness and honestness. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing that's kind of taken out of our communities, but it's remarkable how long people go without recognizing that there's other people can support us and can heal us, but we have to be willing to do that, and we have to be open and we have to be vulnerable, and that's not an easy thing for anyone to do. So yeah, it's just an interesting standpoint in regards to where do we start beginning healing. And for everyone it's kind of different, but it's usually, today anyway, it's really far away from when it should be. It can be decades.
Yes, it can take a long time to get there. And I love the comments that it takes a community, it takes help. There are some things that I really don't think we can handle by ourselves. And things like depression and anxiety are very challenging, and it messes with the way you think. And so it really requires another voice, another someone to be able to help and support, to be able to get through things like that. And I love that we're having this conversation today, because when we're struggling with feeling like we have to hide for whatever reason that might be, or feeling very afraid. I think people feel a lot of afraid, and to be able to open and to be vulnerable takes courage. And it can be hard to get there when you're not in a good place. And so sometimes just listening to someone else's experience, and providing a podcast provides a very safe place to be able to reach into someone else's experience. And then that hopefully will give us a little bit more courage to say, oh, well, here's something I can do. And someone else has been through that too. And I'm not alone. And I don't need to stay stuck. So I love that we're talking about this and creating really a safe place for people to help build up their own courage so that they can take their own first steps.
Yeah, I really don't think that we are designed to deal with what we deal with in 2022 on our own. Anxieties, depression, stress. I always think back to 100,000 years ago when we were living in smaller communities of, let's just say, I don't know, 10 to 20 people. And you wouldn't be able to hide those emotions from people. That, you would, well, you wouldn't need to hide them, first of all, but like you would, you were part of a community, you were part of an organism that like helped each other, and you would have roles. And if you were stressed or anxious or depressed about something, it would be quite clear to the group, to the community. And I like to believe that there would be circles within that community that would create like a healing space, and you would be able to very naturally, very organically work through that with other people. We don't quite have that in 2022 for most people. I think that if you have to be quite enlightened and aware of yourself as an individual, and then be able to communicate with people that you do need support, you do need help, and you can do that in like kind of like a healthy manner. It does, unfortunately, these days take a lot of self-work and enlightenment, and changing your mind to be able to do that. But yeah, I think back to these really small communities where they would have had anxieties, they would have had depressions and traumas, there's no doubt about it, but they would have had the support factor within their group, within their organizations, to be able to deal with that in a timely manner, and move on, and not forget, but like move on and evolve and change and be different, and use that traumatic event, use that depression, use that anxiety as fuel and motivation to move you forward, to advance yourself.
I am going to agree and a little bit disagree. I love the idea that you talk about how wonderfully necessary it is to have a supportive community, and the differences between maybe then and now. And I also loved how you talked about creating a circle. I think whether we're in a community of 10 or 10,000 or 10 million, we can still find that circle of people who can help us to be able to get the support that we need. And it might take a little bit more effort if it's not every person you can trust, but it's still, those people exist. We're here. We're here.
Yeah, our little tribes, right? And they are certainly out there. There are certainly people out there that I genuinely think more people than we think really want to help you, really want to, even if they're strangers. Like, I think a lot of people have got examples of seeing people crying in the street. I like to think most people don't want to run away from that, but they want to connect with that. They know what being sad feels like. They know what grief is like, and we don't want other people to go through that. We're very remarkable human beings when it comes to emotional connectivity. So I think, yeah, being able to find your groups and your tribes, and seeking them out, and then working with them, is without question going to be one of the best things we can do to kickstart that transformation. What I want you've got some books out there. I would love you to tell us about them. You've got Crushed: A Journey Through Depression, and another book called You Got This: An Action Plan to Calm Fear, Anxiety, Worry, and Stress. Why did you write those books, and who are they for?
Excellent question. So I wrote Crushed. It is my personal journey of going through what I did and going through that healing process. And it's not something that I wanted to write, and it's not something that I wanted to share because it makes me very vulnerable. However, it was inspiration, something that I was told to do, and so I did it. But I've had such wonderful responses from people because it's not really about me. Our experiences are universal, even though the specific events that I went through are unique to me. The feelings, the thoughts, they are so relatable. And I've had so many readers come to me and say, I cannot believe you said what you did, but I'm so glad you did because it felt like you were in my head. It felt like I was reading my story. It felt like someone understood me, and it gave me hope that I can heal too. And that's really what it's all about, is to let people know you're not alone, and that the experiences that we have are normal, and they're hard, and they're okay, and that we can heal from them. And so I love to be able to share this with people because of the wonderful responses that we have. The one that I wrote about, You Got This, was prompted by all of the fear that has come from COVID, where people feel just so helpless and fearful. And so many people have thought, what's going to happen? Is my life over? Just so much uncertainty and so much fear. And to be able to know that there's something that we can do to empower ourselves to be able to feel in control. We're not in control of everything that happens in the world, but we are in control of ourselves and our responses. There's a beautiful quote from Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, where he talks about there is a space between stimulus and response. And that space is our ability to choose our response. And in our choices lie our happiness and I can't remember all the words exactly, but the idea is that whatever happens, we have this ability to choose our responses. So through this book, it includes action steps, those small, simple things that we can do, because learning isn't enough. We have to do. And when we change what we do, it changes the way that we feel. And so I want to help empower people to be able to get through their own challenges and to be resilient and to be able to live joyfully in spite of whatever life hands us, and to know that we're going to be okay, even if we don't know what okay looks like.
Wonderful. And you have a podcast as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and where people can find it?
My podcast is called Linda's Corner, Faith, Family, and Living Joyfully. And of course, you can find it on Apple and Google and Spotify and every place you find podcasts. I also have a website. It's called lindascornerpodcast.com. And it is my privilege to talk to amazing people from around the world to help share those things that can help make us happier and healthier. We talk about physical health and mental and emotional. We talk about emotional eating. We talk about overcoming trauma. We have experts in child psychology and in families and just all the kinds of things that might affect us in our daily lives and business and money. And just, I love it. I love it because I get to talk to awesome people and I get to learn from every person that I interact with. And so I really appreciate talking with you today and learning from you.
Well, I'll make sure that the website and social media and links to your books are available in our show notes. But honestly, Linda, thank you so much for joining me today. I thought this was a very powerful conversation, and I've learned a lot as well. And it's wonderful, being able to have this podcast and speak with people from all over the world who do have wildly different experiences. But I love the fact that it always comes back down to energy and hopefulness. And it's wonderful that that's a very, very common experience that a lot of people who are out there attempting to support people and let them know how wonderful and awesome that they can be. So wonderful chatting with you today, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Awesome. Well, that is it for this episode of True Hope Podcast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. If you're listening on iTunes, please leave us a review. I'm pretty sure you can do that on Spotify now. I'm not sure, but check that out. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. And that is it. Yeah, we'll see you next week, guys. Thank you.